The part of the story I've really wanted to talk about was why I was thinking at first of becoming a Catholic priest, a Franciscan priest, but found another way in my life. And so I had been very active in my home parish of St. Anne's in Hoboken, and the church where my father was baptized, I was married and baptized. My children were baptized, and it had a great meaning in my life growing up. I was an altar boy there, and when I entered the seminary, it was to be a Capuchin Franciscan priest of the kind that was there in that parish. And so I spent 6 years in seminary, 4 years high school, 2 years college. And at the time, when we went from high school to college, we had 4 majors that we could declare. We could either major in history, in English, in theology, or psychology. Those were the only 4 majors we seminarians were allowed to have. And I chose in my freshman year at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, because our seminary was in Beacon, New York, I chose psychology. It seemed of those 4 options, it seemed to be the one that aligned mostly with me. And even though a year later I left the seminary, or 2 years later, I left at the end of my sophomore year in college, and I went to St. Peter's College in New Jersey, in Jersey City, I kept psychology as a major. And so I stayed with that through my undergraduate career, and then decided to apply for graduate programs that focused on child development, developmental psychology. I think the reason why I chose child development or developmental psychology is because I've always had a fascination about myself in growing up. And I had this real interest, even as a young boy, in sort of understanding children and looking at children. And I had a real warm spot in my heart. I feel like Miss America, I always wanted to work with children, but there was something about children that fascinated me. And I think in retrospect, it was because I sort of wondered, how I made it through my own life and my own story, and that led me to the field. And so I wound up pursuing my PhD in psychology at Temple University, and stayed in the field, always looking for opportunities that would be focusing on younger and younger children. During graduate school, I had the opportunity, after my 2 years of full-time coursework, or 3 years of full-time coursework, to become a Head Start director in my hometown in Hoboken. They were just expanding Head Start at that point, 1978, from a summer program to a full-year program, and they needed to hire a full-time director, and I applied and got the job, which is actually where I met Kellie, my wife, your mother, your grandmother, whoever in your life she is. And so that led me to really think a lot about services for children, young children. Head Start at the time was for 3 to 5 year olds. And as I continued to work in that field, I began to become interested in the clinical aspects, not just research and teaching in human development, but the clinical aspects. And so I actually then began to work at the Community Mental Health Center at Christ Hospital in Jersey City, around my Head Start days, and that's when I began to engage in practice as a psychotherapist under supervision. And then from that, as I continued to pursue my doctorate, I became a licensed psychologist. I applied for licensure and had all the kinds of supervision you need to do that. And so it began to take me away from just administrative work to more clinical work. And that, in turn, led me to learn about this field. 1987 or 88, I learned about this field called infant mental health. My daughter was born right after I finished my oral defense in 1988, and I traveled to this institute in Illinois for a little time to learn about infant mental health, the Infant Parent Institute. And so from there, it's kind of history. I came back from that and have been working in the field of infant mental health since then, and actually started 2 centers, the YCS Institute for Infant and Preschool Mental Health in 2000, and in 2011 I started the Center for Autism and Early Childhood Mental Health at Montclair State University, and they both are continuing to function. This is 2025, so they continue to survive and function and contribute, I think, in wonderful ways to the state of affairs with regard to infants and young children. So part of my story, part of my legacy, I hope, has been to really find that shift from psychology to working with younger and younger children and bring about systems change for their betterment.